Booktube. So I finally got around to reading Empire the Vampire. Turns out it's not horror. Well, it is fantasy with vampires. Um, okay. It's it reads like someone wrote a young adult book, didn't like it, and rewrote it as adult. Um, the situation is a very young adult, but they drop the F bomb all the time. There's drinking and swearing and sex. It looks like it's just stuffed in there. It's very young adulty. Um, it starts out very much like Harry Potter. Um, there is this kid who has a physically abusive father. Um, he one day when the father acts up, the all of a sudden this kid finds his vampire powers and and fights back against the dad, knocks him out. Um, Later, you find that someone tells him, "Oh, surprise! You're not a real boy at all. You're really a vampire." Because it turns out your dad, who was physically abusive, wasn't your real dad. Surprise! He's not your real dad. Your real dad was a vampire. It's and then he takes him away from his house. Peanut, please stay up there. That's fine. He takes him away from his house and brings him to this vampire academy. The whole thing starts very much like Harry Potter, but instead of saying "You're a wizard, Harry," it's like "You're a vampire, Harry." Surprise! It turns out in their world that you find your vampire powers sometime around puberty, early teenagerhood, very much like the X-Men in the movie. How they explain in the movie, how they explain in the movie where in the X-Men, sometime around puberty, when you have this moment of heightened emotional reaction to something, all of a sudden your X-Men powers come out, and from that point on, you're an X-Men, and you join this superhuman X-Men team to save the world and stuff. That's what happens here. His vampire powers came out sometime around his early teenagerness, and then he was taken away from his home and put into this academy for people with super vampire powers. Yeah. Um, the storyline is very much like it's out of an anime from that point out. There's tons of cliches, both in wording and in the situations. Like there's this one scene where the protagonist um, meets with this the princess who wants to learn how to sword fight, and he says, "Well, I can't teach. She's a girl. I don't know. I'm not doing this." And she says, "Well, see, I knew it. He's just like all men." And he ends up teaching how to sword fight. I'm sorry, teaching her, and her first time sword fighting, she kicks his butt and a sword. And I mean, it's so cliche, but at the same time, and the book never pretends that it isn't cliche. It even uses it to like the situation with the girl and the sword fighting. Yes, Peanut. Want some more? Just like the situation with the girl and the sword fighting. You anticipate what's going to happen, which is the girl kicks his butt the first time she holds a sword, and you kind of giggle at what's coming up. So, at some point, it stops being Harry Potter slash the X-Men, and you kind of lose the point of what's going on with the story because it is so massive. So it just kind of keeps going and going and going and going. And you're looking for something to tie everything together, and they end up on this quest for the Holy Grail, as in the actual Holy Grail is what they're looking for. Um, but so for like 2 or 3 chapters, they hang out in a tavern, getting the team together to look for the Holy Grail, and then something happens, and you forget what they're there for. It feels like the quest for the Holy Grail is just stuffed in there because some editor said you need a point to have the book this long. Ugh. Um. All right. Last one. It's so long that it's divided into books. Each book has chapters. Um, it's like there's so many books in this book, and then each book within those books have certain chapters. I hate it when books do that because it just makes it so confusing when you're talking about it. You've had enough. You've had enough. No more. No more. No more. You've had enough. You've had enough. Okay. When you finish one of the... This is a bad idea. Okay, one more. I read the Kindle version of it. Because I love reading everything on the Kindle. It's so, I can get stuff when I want them. I can put it into a readable font. But reading books on the Kindle, when you finish a book, it splashes this thing and asks you to rate it and marks it as finished. However, with Empire of the Vampire is divided into books. Every time you finish a book, it throws up that same rating thing and asks you to rate it. And when you go back to the home screen where you can see everything, it shows as read, and you can even go back and mark it as unread. But as soon as you open the book again, it again marks it as read. Pina, I'm not going to give you any more. You've had enough. You've had enough. Yes, I know it's very tempting. Then I can't see it. The That's enough. It's the book is very much it is set up much like Interview with a Vampire. Interestingly enough, another vampire book. Um, all right, hold on. Yes. So set up. It is. It starts out much like Interview with the Vampire, where somebody is asking someone else to tell their story of how they became the greatest vampire in the world, whatever. So the events in the story are one person telling a story. So, which means the quotation marks are all messed up. So it becomes very confusing. Essentially, the main character says something that somebody says, so it ends up being double quotes and single quotes, and I have no idea whose idea it was to do that, but it's just so jarring. But all that being said, for what it is, it's a decent book. There are cliches, but they don't pretend that they're not cliched. The character descriptions are on point. Even though the characters are basically templates from an anime, their voices are done very well. The book is very immersive. The world building is top notch. Um, the book is huge, but if you're looking for a world to escape into, this is done very well. Um, it is not. It's not. The book isn't for me because it doesn't have what I'm looking for. I was looking for a horror book. This is fantasy. This is fantasy with vampires in it. I'm not a fantasy guy, but this is done very well. Um, I ended up DNFing the book about halfway through because it's just so massive, and I have other books to get to. Um, I didn't stop reading because it's a bad book. I stopped reading it because I was just spending way too long reading it, and I have other stuff to get to. If I were to rate it, being that I only read the first half, I would give it 7 talking swords out of 10 holy grails. I'm liking this rating system. Thanks for hanging out to the end. Please visit the gift store on the way out. Buy one of my books. Amazon author page is down in the description. Here's my cat doing stuff. Bye.